Refresh now and return to the archive. A new request has been logged within the Alexandria mechanism. A new chronicle retrieved from the vaults of time. I am the Clockwork Archivist. My function is to preserve and to narrate. Tonight's selection is a departure from our last entry, a story not of venom and shadow, but of peculiar cleverness and baffling absurdity. It is a case which amused Mr. Holmes greatly, a puzzle he called The Adventure of the Red-Headed League. Let the gears turn, let the record play, and let us journey back to Baker Street. The account, as recorded by Dr. Watson, begins one autumn afternoon. He had called upon his friend Sherlock Holmes and found him in deep conversation with a very stout, florid-faced elderly gentleman with fiery red hair. Watson made to leave, but Holmes pulled him back into the room. "You could not have come at a better time, my dear Watson," he said, with a glint in his eye. The red-headed gentleman rose with a nod. His name was Mr. Jabez Wilson. He was a pawnbroker, a simple man of business, and yet he was the center of one of the most singular chains of events Watson had ever heard. Holmes leaned back in his chair, his fingertips pressed together. "Tell us your story, Mr. Wilson, from the very beginning." Mr. Wilson pulled a folded newspaper from his pocket. "It started 2 months ago," he began, his voice slow and earnest. "My business is a small one, and I keep one assistant. His name is Vincent Spaulding. He's a smart lad, good at his job, but he has one fault. He is always taking photographs and spends hours in the cellar developing them. One day, he came to me with this advertisement in his hand. He pointed it out, saying it was a great fortune for me." Mr. Wilson passed the paper to Holmes. It read, "To the Red-Headed League. There is a vacancy for a member of the league, and the salary is a nominal £4 a week. All red-headed men, sound in body and mind, are eligible. Apply in person on Monday at 11 o'clock to Duncan Ross at the offices of the league, 7 Pope's Court, Fleet Street." Watson murmured that it was most unusual. "I thought so too," said Mr. Wilson, "but Spaulding insisted I apply. He said the money was from an eccentric American millionaire who was himself red-headed and wanted to help his kind. So I closed my shop for the morning, and I went. The scene at Pope's Court was astonishing. Fleet Street was choked with red-headed men. It seemed that every man in London with a shade of red in his hair had answered the call. I pushed my way through the crowd into the office. There, a small man, with hair even redder than my own, who introduced himself as Duncan Ross, interviewed me. He seemed pleased with my hair. He even gave it a sharp tug to ensure it was real. In a moment, he announced that I was hired. All the other candidates were sent away. Holmes leaned forward. "And what, pray tell, was the nature of your duties?" Mr. Wilson looked bewildered. "That was the strangest part. I was to remain in the office from 10 o'clock in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. I was not, under any circumstances, to leave the building during those hours. And my task was to copy out the Encyclopedia Britannica." Holmes and Watson exchanged a look of pure astonishment. "I was given the first volume," Mr. Wilson continued, "and a stock of ink and pens. Mr. Ross would look in from time to time, but otherwise I was left alone. It was good, easy pay, and I did my work diligently every day. This continued for 8 weeks. I had filled a shelf with my writings, and then, this morning, it all came to an end." He sighed deeply. "I went to the office as usual, but the door was locked. A small sign was tacked upon it. It read, 'The Red-Headed League is dissolved, October 9th, 1890. I was stunned. I asked the landlord, the shopkeepers. No one had ever heard of Mr. Duncan Ross or the League. The whole thing had vanished. I am not a rich man, Mr. Holmes, and I do not wish to lose £4 a week for nothing. So I came to you." After Mr. Wilson had left, Holmes sat in silence for some time, lost in thought. He found the case, he told Watson, to be a three-pipe problem. Suddenly, he sprang to his feet. "Come, Watson, come," he cried. "Let us go to Saxe-Coburg Square and inspect the scene of these strange events." They journeyed to the quiet, shabby little square where Mr. Wilson's pawnshop was located. Holmes walked up and down the street, observing everything with intense focus. Then he stopped in front of the shop, and, with the head of his walking stick, he thumped vigorously upon the pavement 2 or 3 times. Finally, he knocked upon the shop door. It was opened by the assistant, Vincent Spaulding, a bright-eyed young man with a white splash of acid upon his forehead. "I wish to know the way to the Strand," Holmes asked. The assistant gave him the directions, and then closed the door. "Watson," Holmes said quietly as they walked away, "I wanted to see him. But more than that, I wanted to see the knees of his trousers." Watson, completely mystified, asked what he had seen. "What I expected to see," Holmes replied with a smile. "This matter is a serious one. A crime is being prepared. Tonight, Watson, we shall go to the cellar of the City and Suburban Bank, which happens to be just behind Mr. Wilson's shop, and I suggest you bring your service revolver." That night, Holmes, Watson, and 2 others, a police inspector and a bank director, hid themselves in the pitch-dark cellar of the bank. The air was heavy, musty, and cold. They sat upon crates, surrounded by stacks of gold bars, their nerves stretched to the breaking point. The hours passed in absolute silence, broken only by the faint rumble of a distant carriage. Watson's heart pounded in his chest. Then, suddenly, a glimmer of light appeared through a crack in the stone floor. Slowly, silently, one of the broad white flagstones began to lift. A hand appeared, then a head. It was the face of the assistant, Vincent Spaulding. He climbed out of the hole, followed by his accomplice, the red-headed man, Duncan Ross. They had tunneled from the pawnshop cellar into the bank vault. "Now!" cried Holmes, leaping from his crate and seizing the assistant by the collar. The other man darted back down the hole, but it was too late. The police were waiting at the other end. Vincent Spaulding, who was in fact the notorious and cunning criminal John Clay, was captured. The Red-Headed League had been nothing more than an elaborate ruse, a way to get the pawnbroker, Mr. Wilson, out of his shop for 4 hours every day, so that they could dig their tunnel undisturbed. Back at Baker Street, Holmes explained his reasoning to a very impressed Watson. "You see, Watson," he began, "the moment I heard of the copying of the encyclopedia, I knew it was a distraction. The only question was why. The assistant's habit of spending hours in the cellar was the first clue. Then, when I thumped the pavement, I heard that it was hollow, confirming the existence of a tunnel. Finally, when I saw the knees of the assistant's trousers were worn and stained, I knew he had been digging for hours on end. The whole affair of the Red-Headed League was simply the most ingenious way to ensure their target. The simple Mr. Wilson would be out of the way while they worked. The cleverness of it is truly remarkable. The chronicle is now complete, and the record is sealed. A reminder that even the most baffling absurdity can mask a simple, daring design. The mind that perceives the pattern is the one that solves the puzzle. If these records from the Alexandria mechanism bring you calm or quiet contemplation, I invite you to subscribe and to activate the notification bell. The archive is vast, and many more stories await their telling. Until next time, remain still and listen.